So we have quite for once a non-energy or non-energy first session this morning, which is transport, trade, and reviving the Silk Road. Wide subject, very wide region, and wide array of contributors. As you have on your program, there is a keynote speech which was supposed to be delivered by Minister Yildirim of Transport of Turkey, but we just got news that Minister Yildirim has been kept by a cabinet meeting and therefore could not attend. So Vice Minister Bash is with us for the same Ministry of Transportation, of course, in charge of this sector. We know the very dynamic approach of Turkey to this Central Asian region, this continental dimension of the policy of Turkey, and therefore will be very much interested in having his keynote speech now before we come to the different views from the group. So, Mr. Vice Minister, welcome. And please, if you are ready to give your keynote address now, we'll be happy to listen to you.
Değerli katılımcılar, saygıdeğer misafirler. Dünyanın önemli düşünce kuruluşlarından birisi olan Atlantik Konseyi'nin ülkemizde düzenlediği bu geniş katılımlı zirvede sizlerle beraber olmaktan duyduğum memnuniyeti belirtmek isterim. Ve hepinizi sevgi ve saygıyla selamlıyorum. Bu platformda bakanlığımızın tarihi İpek yolunu canlandırmak konusundaki görüşlerini sizlerle paylaşmak istiyorum. Kıymetli misafirler, bildiğiniz gibi Türkiye Doğu ile Batı'yı birbirine bağlayan kıtalar arası bir köprü niteliği taşımaktadır. Aslında bu cümle tarihi İpek yolunun güzergahını da tanımlayan bir ibaredir. İpek yolu Çin'den başlayarak Anadolu ve Akdeniz üzerinden Avrupa'ya kadar uzanan dünyaca ünlü bir ticaret yoludur. Milattan önceden başlayarak yüzyıllardan beri doğudan batıya doğru gelişen ticari hareketlilikte yoğun bir şekilde ipek, porselen, kağıt, baharat ve değerli taşların taşımacılığı yapılmıştır. İpek yolu, Asya'yı Avrupa'ya bağlayan bir ticaret yolu olmasının ötesinde, güzergah üzerinde yaşayan kültürlerin ve izlerini taşımakta ve olağanüstü bir tarihsel ve kültürel zenginlik sunmaktadır. Ulaştırma, Denizcilik ve Haberleşme Bakanlığı olarak bugün Orta Asya ve Kafkasya'da bulunan ülkeler ile gerçekleştirdiğimiz bütün toplantılarda İpek yolunun canlandırılması konusu önemli gündem maddelerinden birisini oluşturmaktadır. Toplamda yaklaşık 6.000 kilometre uzunluğundaki İpek yolunun sadece Asya kıtasında ondan fazla ülkeden geçtiğini göz önünde bulundurursak, güzergah üzerindeki ülkelerin ortak gerçekleştireceği çalışmaların İpek yolunun canlandırılması açısından önemini daha iyi anlaşılacağını düşünüyoruz. Kıymetli katılımcılar, İpek yolunun Anadolu'daki 3 ana güzergahı üzerinden Avrupa'ya uzandığını söyleyebiliriz. Bunlardan ilki doğrudan Anadolu toprakları üzerinden hiç denize inmeden Avrupa'ya açılan karasal güzergahtır. Bu güzergah üzerinde taşımacılığın iyileştirilmesi amacıyla demiryolu ve karayolu alanında gerçekleştirdiğimiz çalışmalardan sizlere kısaca bahsetmek istiyorum. Bugün Türkiye'nin tam doğusunda ülkemizi Kafkasya ve Orta Asya'ya bağlayan ve halihazırda sınır geçişlerine açık olan 6 gümrük kapımız bulunmaktadır. Bunların 6'sı da karayolu sınır kapısı özelliğini taşırken sadece Kapıköy'den demiryolu ile sınır geçişi yapılmaktadır. Biz gümrük kapılarının işletmeciliğinde, ulaştırma altyapı projelerimizde de son yıllarda sıklıkla kullandığımız, dünyada Türk modeli olarak bilinen yap işlet devlet uygulamasını hayata geçirdik. Yukarıda bahsettiğim 6 sınır kapısından en işlek ikisi konumundaki Gürbulak Gümrük Kapısı'nı 2003 yılında, Sarp Gümrük Kapısı'nı ise 2009 yılında yap işlet devlet modeliyle yeniden yapılandırarak işletmeye açtık. Bununla birlikte diğer 4 gümrük kapısının yine yap işlet devlet modeliyle yeniden yapılandırarak modern bir yapıya kavuşturması amacıyla ilgili şirket sözleşmeleri imzalanmıştır. İnşallah sözleşme gereğince 2014 yılı içinde bu 4 gümrük kapısının da yapılandırılması tamamlanacaktır. Öte yandan ülkemizin doğusunda 2 yeni demiryolu kapısını komşularımız Gürcistan ve Azerbaycan ile gündemimizdeki 2 demiryolu projesini tamamladıktan sonra açacağız. Bunlardan ilki sizlerin de bildiğini tahmin ettiğim Bakü-Tiflis-Kars demiryolu projesidir. 2007 yılında söz konusu demiryolunun inşasına başladık. 2014 yılı içinde bu hattı işletmeye açmayı planlıyoruz. Bakü-Tiflis-Kars demiryolu projesi kapsamında 76 kilometresi Türkiye'de, 29 kilometresi Gürcistan'da olmak üzere toplam 105 kilometre yeni demiryolu hattı inşa edilecek olup, hattın bağlantı sağlayacağı Bakü'ye kadar olan kısmı da iyileştirilmektedir. Bakü-Tiflis-Kars demiryolunun işletmeye açılması ile orta vadede yıllık 3 milyon ton yük taşınması beklenmektedir. 2034 yılına gelindiğinde ise yılda 3 milyon yolcu ve 17 milyon ton yük taşınması yapılması hedeflenmektedir. Ülkemizi demiryolu hattı ile Orta Asya'ya bağlayacak bir diğer proje olan Kars-Iğdır, Aralık, Dilicusu, Nahçıvan demiryolu projesinin hayata geçirilmesi konusunda Azerbaycan ile geçtiğimiz aylarda prensipte anlaşmaya vardık. Süreç bundan sonra işleyecek. Proje, maliyet ve ortak yatırım çalışmaları yapılacak. Yapım mühaleleri ise daha sonra gerçekleşecektir. Bakü-Tiflis-Kars projesinin tamamlanması ile Çin'den hareket eden ve İpek Yolu güzergahından Anadolu'ya girip Avrupa'ya gidecek olan bir yük treninin kesintisiz yoluna devam edebilmesi için bir eksik kesimin daha tamamlanması gerekiyor. O da İstanbul-Boğaz geçişidir. İşte bu noktada asrın projesi olarak tanımlanan Marmaray'dan sizlere kısaca bahsetmek istiyorum. 3 milyar dolardan yüksek maliyetle dünyanın en iddialı ulaştırma projelerinden biri olan Marmaray Demiryolu Tüp Geçiş Projesi'ni hızla inşa etmekteyiz. Marmaray projesi 76 kilometrelik bir demiryolu hattından oluşacak ve İstanbul Boğazı'nın altından geçen 1,4 kilometre uzunluğunda bir batırma tüp tünelle Avrupa ve Asya kıtalarını kesintisiz bir biçimde demiryolu ile bağlayacaktır. Tünelin deniz altında batırıldığı derinlik 56 metreye kadar inmektedir. Bu şekliyle Marmaray, dünyada bir boğazı 2 yakasından birleştiren en derin tüp tünel olma özelliğini taşımaktadır. Projenin tamamlanmasıyla Boğaz'ın iki yakası arasında ulaşım 4 dakikada mümkün olacaktır. Gündüz yolcu taşımacılığı için kullanılacak olan Marmaray hattında geceleri yük taşımacılığı yapılacaktır. Bakü, Tiflis, Kars ve Marmaray projeleri tamamlanması ile Pekin'den hareket eden bir yük treni Londra'ya kadar kesintisiz olarak hareket edebilecektir. Değerli misafirler, bu noktada İpek Yolu güzergahında raylar üzerinden konforlu ve güvenli yolcu taşımacılığının gerçekleştirilmesi amacıyla ülkemizin yüksek hızlı tren projeleri kapsamında başlattığı çalışmalarını sizlere nakletmek istiyorum. Türkiye ilk olarak Ankara-Eskişehir hattında yüksek hızlı tren işletmeciliğine 2009 yılı Mart ayı içinde başlamıştır. Ankara-Eskişehir hattının işletmeye açılmasıyla ülkemiz dünyada 8. Avrupa'da 6. yüksek hızlı tren işletmecisi ülke olarak yerini almıştır. Söz konusu hat ülkemizin en kalabalık iki şehri olan İstanbul-Ankara arasındaki yüksek hızlı tren bağlantısının birinci kesimini oluşturmakta olup Eskişehir ile İstanbul arasındaki ikinci kesimde devam eden çalışmalar gelecek yıl sonunda tamamlanacaktır. İpek Yolu güzergahı üzerinde oluşturmak istediğimiz yüksek hızlı demiryolu ağının batıda Edirne'ye, doğuda ise Kars'a kadar uzanması planlanmaktadır. Demiryollarına gerçekleştirdiğimiz bu çalışmalardan sonra müsaadenizle karayollarında son yıllarda yaptığımız büyük atılımlardan sizlere bahsetmek istiyorum. Ülkemiz coğrafyasındaki bütün vatandaşlarımızın da takdir ettiği en büyük değişim bölünmüş yollar alanında yaptık. Göreve geldiğimiz 2002 yılında 81 vilayetimizden sadece 6'sı bölünmüş yollarla birbirine bağlıyken bugün 74 vilayetimiz bölünmüş yollarla birbirine bağlanmıştır. Ülkemizin doğusunda giriş yapan bir araç bugün Edirne'ye kadar bölünmüş yollar üzerinde hareket edebilmektedir. Yine yap işlet devlet modeliyle inşasını gündemimize aldığımız birçok otoyolu projesinden, Gerede Gürbulak otoyolu projesinden doğrudan İpek Yolu güzergahında bulunduğu için sizlere bahsetmek istiyorum. Malumunuz olduğu üzere Edirne'den Bolu'nun Gerede ilçesine kadar mevcut bir otoyolumuz bulunmaktadır. Bizler bu hattı öncelikle Gerede'den Amasya'nın Merzifon ilçesine, sonra da Merzifon'dan Ağrı'nın Gürbulak ilçesine kadar uzatmak istiyoruz. 1000 kilometrenin üzerinde bu otoyol projesinin tamamlanmasıyla ülkemizin doğusundan giriş yapan bir araç tamamıyla otoyol üzerinden ülkemizin batısına Avrupa'ya geçiş yapabilecektir. Demir yollarında olduğu gibi karayollarında da önemli geçiş noktalarından bir tanesi İstanbul Boğazı oluşturmaktadır. İstanbul Boğazı üzerindeki karayolu geçişini rahatlatmak amacıyla 3. köprünün ihalesi yap işlet devlet modeliyle gerçekleştirildi ve yüklenici firma çalışmalarına başladı. İnşallah İstanbul Boğazı'ndaki 3. gerdanlık olacak 3. köprüyü 2015 yılında hizmete açacağız. Hükümetimizin yürüttüğü özelleştirme faaliyetleri çerçevesinde son 10 yılda birçok limanımızın özel sektöre devri gerçekleştirilmiştir. Bugün Karadeniz'deki Trabzon ve Samsun limanlarımız, Akdeniz'deki İskenderun, Mersin ve Antalya limanlarımız Asya'dan Avrupa'ya ve ötesine ve tersi yönde yapılan taşımalarda önemli bir uğrak yer haline gelmiştir. Saygıdeğer misafirler, konuşmamın başında sıkça kullanılan bir cümle olarak ülkemizin köprü konumundan bahsedildiğini belirtmiştim. Aslına bakarsanız köprü pasif bir eylemdir. Bizler ulaştırma alanında yaptığımız yatırımlar ile Türkiye'nin köprülük mevkiini aktif hale getirdik. Bugün Türkiye köprü konumundan daha ziyade insanların ve yüklerin aktığı bir şebeke konumundadır. Sözlerime burada son verirken sizlerle buluşma imkanını bize bahşeden Atlantik Konseyi yöneticilerine tekrar teşekkür ediyor. Hepinize saygılar sunuyorum.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Minister. we've had exactly what any moderator would like, that is, come to very precise operative dimensions. Because in the end, we have to take this dimension if we want to speak about what is really happening. Indeed, Central Asia has been very much calling for great expectations. I mean, it started with Alexander the Great, so we are quite familiar with his grand views. And at the same time, well, it's part of history, but maybe we should be a bit careful on this, because big formulas don't necessarily deliver, even if they say as great ideas. We have heard about the Great Game. We hear about Heart of Asia, and well, even the new Silk Road still has to be implemented. It's appealing expression, but in the end, what is really taking place is the real matter. And this is what our speakers of today, following the Vice Minister, will try to bring to you. Indeed, we have very experienced people with Mr. Bathija here as Senior Economic Advisor to President Karzai, and long multilateral experience within UNCTAD, and especially the 4th UN Conference of UNCTAD, and the setting of objectives and covering this problem of infrastructure and so on. Assistant Secretary Bob Blake, covering South and Central Asia in the State Department, is also very much on the ground. From my 6-year practice, I would say the best way to meet him is find an airport where you will land the same way he's landing. Otherwise, very difficult to catch him in Washington. I can speak from experience. Of course, continuing with Ambassador Chrysanthopoulos, who has been so many years in BSEC, I mean, the Black Sea, he knows all the corners of the region, and is continuing on this logic of linking the continents through the International Road Association. And finally, with Mr. Gerhaeusser, coming from ADB, you can see in the reference book that he has been posted in almost all places, all corners of Asia, from central to south to extreme to far east and so on. So this is giving to us the opportunity to speak about facts. And I think this is on the subject which is coming easily to the mind, but not necessarily very concrete. This is what we can bring to you today. I just will pick facts to start with. NDN, Northern Distribution Network, absolutely key for the follow-up of the activity of the coalition in Afghanistan in the last years. Tremendous achievement. When you look at the map from the Baltic Sea to the heart of Afghanistan, this has been an impressive realization. At the same time, a complex one. I remember a conference where all the participants, operators, were saying that 60% of the cost and of the time of NDN operation, even so important as such, is devoted to border crossing. 60%. Well, it tells something about what should be coped with. Of course, well, let's say bribes, corruption is part of the crossing so many borders maybe, but it's far too much to spend 60% of time and money in that way. Now, at the same time, the other perspective, which is the subject of today, is it possible to make it dual purpose and move in the coming years from military to civil use for the benefit of linking the different parts of the region, different parts of this wide Eurasia region. Then about the routes, the roads, indeed great projects. European Union started 20 years ago, I can say that, I remember, with Traceka. But, well, experts were recommending roads and routes and railways, and the leaders decided they would prefer this or that. And so, in many cases, at the border, they didn't cross or meet at the same place. So, mixed experience, I would say, but at the same time, look at Chinese investment, road building, tunnel digging, bridge building is moving on at the heart of the Pamir region in a very dynamic way. I continue with energy. We all recognize, here we have to speak around this context of energy mobilization, which is at the core of Eurasia, but they are very much linked. If TAPI is ever built, TAPI will not be only a pipeline. It will be more than that. But at the same time, I mean, look at the road shows we have had recently about TAPI. Not so many companies were ready to attend that, just because there are plenty of question marks. Look further at the Istanbul process. A very interesting set of meetings mobilizing neighborhood cooperation. And this is a very good project, but it has to take shape with the commitment of the neighbors with Afghanistan. And we'll hear, I'm sure, more about that. Look at the project of Eurasian Union, but the question is, I mean, pushed by Russia. How far infrastructure projects are just pushed by this union? How far does this union go? Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan are not within this Eurasian Union up to now. So, big question. And I would finish with a rather sour note. Allow me to argue that the only Silk Road which is really working is the drug and chemical precursors road. This works terribly well, and all too well, in fact. So let's reflect that in terms of real connection in this region, a lot has to be made, and therefore we need to cope with these direct questions. So I will turn to Mr. Bathija, who will open this kind of review of the situation. Please. So 5-6 minutes, quick presentation in a row.
And they organize for it. Of course, not only the Silk Road Initiative, but Istanbul process and many such initiatives, which Afghanistan is the principal beneficiary out of it. When you gave an overview of the number of issues and initiatives which is being taken place in this region, particularly Afghanistan comes right to the heart of it, because we may be the beneficiary out of it. The Silk Road Initiative, of course, when you already gave the history of it, but we would go beyond the history of it. All these years which such initiative comes in, gets updated, and new ideas comes in. Now the Silk Road, which again started from China all the way to Europe, but now this time could be Silk Road, could be a label name, which could even start from Saigon, which could even go all the way from any perspective, but just the name, and then build the commerce, trade, development under that road. We attach quite a bit of importance to this initiative, because this initiative will provide us an opportunity, because Afghanistan is a landlocked country, and my personal view is that we should unlock that landlockedness. By doing that, what I mean is we should become the transit, transport, investment hub of the whole region, connecting Central Asia, South Asia, West Asia, and beyond. And if that is what achieved through the Silk Road, which I think it can, this would be a step in a very right direction to do so. Similarly, Silk Road is not only the trade routes, which of course in earlier days it was considered to be, but Silk Road could also have initiative, as you rightly said, the other areas such as energy, for example. Afghanistan is or wish to be considered as a facilitator of such energy corridors. For example, TAPI is one of it, which we are working on it. Kaza 1000 is another one. And just a few months back, for example, our good neighbor Pakistan was buying electricity from Uzbekistan, asked us if Afghanistan should provide the facilities of the transit. But with a pleasure. So that is another view that we are thinking of it and so on. In addition to that, it's the private sector which will get involved fully in this whole process of the Silk Road Initiative, which will bring enormous amount of businesses, people-to-people contact, connectivity, and integration within the region, which I think we can certainly build upon it on that side. I will stop here, but there's plenty to say about Afghanistan and so on, but I'm sure it will come in the course of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bathija. Ambassador Blake.
Thank you very much. It's also a pleasure for me to be here today, and I want to thank our Atlantic Council hosts, but also our Turkish hosts. It's great to be back with my good old friend Pierre Morel. As he said, we didn't normally have the chance to come to beautiful places like Istanbul. More often we were meeting in the transit lounge in Tajikistan or some other glamorous place like that. I'd like to just take as my point of departure just the overall strategic context, which is that the United States is looking at this regional integration objective in the context of supporting the important transitions that are taking place in Afghanistan, both the security transition, but also the political transition that will take place with the elections in 2014, and equally important, the economic transition. And that is, how do we develop, as Ambassador Bathija said, a private sector and trade-led economy in Afghanistan, particularly after 2014? And the answer, we believe, is to encourage regional integration, to develop these pipelines, these roads, these rail networks, and importantly, the transit trade. Ambassador Morel referred to a great game that might be underway, and I think the experience of the last year or so has shown that increasingly the countries of the region don't see this as a great game, but rather as a great gain. And indeed, I have stolen that particular phrase from the new Foreign Minister of Kazakhstan, Leonidas, who coined that, and I think it's a very apt description. Now, why do I say that? I think there have been a series of good international meetings that have taken place, the Istanbul process that Ambassador Bathija talked about, but also the very important NATO summit in Chicago, and the Tokyo conference in Tokyo in this past summer, all of which showed that there is strong regional and international support for this transition process for Afghanistan, and that this support will continue well beyond 2014. Just to take the example of the Tokyo conference, donors pledged an additional $16 billion worth of support through 2015 on the economic side to complement the assistance that NATO countries will be providing post-2014. Likewise, I'm sure my good friend Klaus Gerhaeusser will talk about the very important CARIC conference that just took place, in which, again, a considerable envelope of funds have been pledged to support this regional integration project in Central Asia and Afghanistan. Let me just point to three concrete ways in which we see that there is progress beyond the consensus that I talked about. The first is energy. Reference has already been made to TAPI. All of the countries of the TAPI project have agreed on gas sales purchase agreements. A roadshow has taken place. And now the really hard part will start, which is to form a consortium to actually build this pipeline. And so we are hard at work with the Asia Development Bank and others to encourage the parties to reach a consensus on this and to move this thing forward, because I think this would be a very strong and concrete demonstration of the value of regional integration. Let me also point to the electricity transmission projects that are already underway. Uzbekistan already is providing significant electricity that is helping to light Kabul. Likewise, Turkmenistan is increasing dramatically its electricity exports to Afghanistan. And further down the line, we are working very closely to try to reduce tensions between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan that would unlock the capacity for the Central Asia, South Asia electricity transmission line, the so-called CASA 1000 line. So we think that there are very good opportunities and also substantial momentum. I should also mention, in terms of energy cooperation, that uranium exports from Kazakhstan are now powering nuclear power plants in India. And India and Pakistan are taking important steps. It's interesting that now Pakistan is figuring out how to meet some of its energy needs by exploring the possibility of developing pipelines through India to take advantage of India's refining capacity to help meet and also to help build the cooperation that's taking place between India and Pakistan. A second tangible area is railways. Uzbekistan has taken the lead in building with the ADB the railway that goes down all the way to Mazar-e-Sharif. The hope is eventually to connect these railways down to the Indian Ocean that will provide a very important outlet for potentially Chinese exports, but also exports from Central Asia. Likewise, the Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan are cooperating on a line that will come down through Turkmenistan to link up to that central railway link that I talked about. So I think there's good positive momentum in that respect as well. And eventually the hope, of course, is that you can connect the markets of India and Central Asia and well beyond through some of these important links. The third, I think, very concrete area of cooperation and progress is in the transit trade. Ultimately, the real game changer, I think, is going to be when it's going to be possible for Bangladeshi and Indian trucks to traverse all the way through Pakistan and Afghanistan into Central Asia and beyond. India and Pakistan are making very good progress in their own bilateral relations. Trade has increased from about $300 million 10 years ago to $270 million. And with the most favored nation status that Pakistan is expected to provide later this year to India, it's probably going to jump to $10 billion. So a very significant increase. The next step then will be to try to allow a transit trade for Indian trucks through Pakistan, India, and into Afghanistan. That would be of huge benefit to Afghanistan as well and enable a very substantial increase in Afghan exports back into the huge and growing Indian market. I think I should just say much more needs to be done. As part of the effort on the part of the international community to encourage support for Afghanistan post-2014, there's also a very important mutual accountability framework. That is that Afghanistan itself must create the conditions for improved private investment. It must pass laws like a banking law, like a mining law, to provide a clear regulatory framework for the investments that must take place in these areas. It must reduce corruption. It must improve governance, all of which will help a lot to, again, establish the conditions for this. But I think I just conclude on a positive note to say that we do believe that there's momentum. We do believe that crucially now there's a consensus in the region and beyond to move forward with this. And so the challenge is now to move ahead on all these different fronts, to work together and to, again, be very clear-eyed about the challenges, but also positive about the possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Indeed, we deepen our understanding of the opportunities step by step, and we'll continue with Ambassador Chrysanthopoulos. Please.
Yes. Thank you. I would like, first of all, to thank the organizers for this. I think I've been in all the meetings of the Atlantic Council from the outset, all of them here in Istanbul. But to go to the essence now of our discussion. With road transport, we eliminate the notion of landlocked countries. And that's the important issue. And this is why the revival of the ancient Silk Road to international road transport is beneficial to everybody. We have started, when I was in the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization, we gave great emphasis on road transport, and we signed the memorandum for the construction of the Black Sea Ring Highway, a road 300 kilometers that would effectively join the European road network to that of Asia. And it's going well. I mean, Turkey has done its part unilaterally. I mean, it has done from the Georgian border up to the Bulgarian border. Greece has done its part from the Ionian Sea up to the Turkish border. And it's going well. With BSEC and IRU organized the Black Sea Ring Highway Caravan, which was 12 trucks that went around the Ring Highway to see what kind of problems we would find. It was one thing. And the other thing was to promote this project, which is a flagship project of BSEC. And we found things. But also afterwards, IRU organized with ECHO the caravan, the Silk Road Caravan, which went into Afghanistan, and there again we saw what problems we had. So the basic conclusion is that it's not so much the infrastructure. The infrastructure can be done. The basic problem is waiting at the border crossings. That's the basic problem. I mean, for example, 40% of time lost, I mean, time lost in these trips, 40% is by the waiting lines at the border. 38% of the cost of transport goes to illicit payments. And that's the big problem. And the solution to this is very easy. It is the implementation of the United Nations Conventions of Facilitation of Road Transport. And this is what the International Road Union now is doing. I mean, for example, they have an IRU border, we have initiated an IRU border waiting times observatory, where the truck driver knows that if he goes to this border, he will wait so many hours. If he goes to the other border, he will wait less hours, so he can choose. We're organizing, we have set a tier electronic pre-declaration system where the information is sent to the customs beforehand, and we're trying now to organize green lanes which allows the trucks that have these documents to pass without more complications. Another thing that we did in BSEC, which was very significant, was that we made the agreement of the BSEC permit for trucks. These were permits, we did it on a project basis, with the participation of 7 countries, with permits issued. We issued 200 permits to the 7 participating countries, which allows a truck driver from Ankara to pass through the 7 countries with 1 piece of paper instead of 7 pieces of paper. But this had a very important political implication, because it allowed for the first time Armenian trucks to go through Turkey with the BSEC permit, because with the normal bilateral permits, since there was no diplomatic relations between the 2 countries, it was not possible. And this was a very silent success story of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization at the time, and we're very happy to hear that ECHO is also interested in doing such an initiative. To go back to BSEC again, BSEC is also, and we're going to have, under the Turkish chairmanship of BSEC, we have a meeting at the end of the month of the Ministers of Transport, where we are going to launch the project, which is, again, an implementation of a UN agreement. It is the project that will allow, it's called the International Vehicle Weight Certificate. What happens is that now any truck traveling through countries can be weighed at any time and is usually penalized because the weight machines in each country show different weights. And this is also used for illicit payments also. Now, this is a document, a United Nations document, that will be given to the truck, who will not be weighed until its arrival. This project also and it's BSEC that's going to launch it. I mean, there are all the countries who have signed the UNECE agreement. None of them have implemented yet. It's going to be implemented now for the first time by the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization with the assistance and the support of UNECE and UNDP and IRU, of course. Now, and of course, with Afghanistan, it is a very important. It is a very important. Also, what Mr. Bathija said about, and I think that he also participated in the Silk Road caravan that was done by IRU and by ECHO, and and IRU is cooperating with the United States in development and stabilization there, and it's also supporting the demining activities in Afghanistan. Now, on the question of the railroad that was mentioned, objectively speaking, the railroad costs lots of money, much more than road transport. It uses much more energy also. And I would just like to remind you of a little bit of the role of road transport in CO2 emissions. The footprint of road transport is very small. Overall, transport accounts for 30% of CO2 emissions, while the commercial road transport industry is responsible for 3% of that. And we are working to reduce the CO2 emissions by 30% up to the year of 2030. Of course, okay, we have the issue of biofuels. That's another thing where we found, I mean, when we have in Europe the total production of, I mean, out of the total production of rapeseed in Europe, 60% is used for biofuels. In the United States, 50% of corn production is used for biofuels. The result is increase of the global price of food, more people starving. So we think that other measures should be taken there. We should be very careful on the welfare of humanity. So these are the few things that I would just like to say, Ambassador, at this moment. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Yes, it works. Thank you. The final angle will come from Manila. That is Asian Development Bank having the full perspective on the whole region. Mr. Gerhaeusser.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting ADB to be part of the panel. ADB for the past 10 years has been engaged in what is called CAREC, Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Initiative. It's an initiative covering 10 countries, starting in China, Mongolia, Central Asian countries, South Asia, India, Pakistan, and Azerbaijan. So it covers a huge geographic area. Within CAREC, focus is on transport and energy, connectivity, recreating a modern Silk Road by enhancing the connectivity on physical infrastructure. In the past 10 years, within the CAREC initiative, about $20 billion in investment were effected, comprising road construction, road rehabilitation, railways, energy infrastructure, and so on. The CAREC program has identified 6 corridors which combine Europe, Russia, Middle East with Central South Asia and East Asia. And those 6 corridors intersect very closely with a northern distribution network. So there's a very good match in terms of the issues which in particular Ambassador Morel and Blake mentioned on northern distribution network and how it can then subsequently be used as a basis for further developing the Silk Road. But physical investment is only one part. The second part is investment in the soft side, customs harmonization, cross-border transport facilitation. And these are the issues which we have mentioned that, for example, in the Northern Distribution Network, 60% of the time delay in the cost is associated with border crossings. So heavy investment in the softer side is important and is part of the CARIC initiative. When we look forward, there has been a lot of asset creation. Asset creation needs to be complemented with sustainability consideration, operating maintenance, having appropriate institutional and policy environment in order to maintain both the transport in order to ensure that both the transport and the energy infrastructure is maintained. For example, in the case of Afghanistan, that means you establish a rail authority, a road authority. You need to think about the funding mechanism, particularly with the external financing still being dominant within the public finances of Afghanistan. For example, having a dedicated road fund established. Private sector involvement is essential for the future of the further development of the Silk Road. So far, a lot has been done and spearheaded by governments, by public sector, and the Northern Distribution Network is also originating from military considerations. So getting the private sector into investment through public-private partnerships, through operating maintenance contracts and other mechanisms will be important. It will also be important, and ADB has initiated a corridor performance measurement and monitoring system where you actually monitor the progress through capturing the time required as well as the cost associated with utilizing the corridors. Those will give you valuable information where the bottlenecks are, bottlenecks in terms of time, speed, but also formal and informal costs in utilizing the corridors. When we look forward, TABI has already been mentioned as a major initiative and regional project. TUTAP is something which is currently being conceptualized. TUTAP combining Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. And the idea behind it is utilizing what Ambassador Blake already mentioned, the transmission between Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, Afghanistan on electricity, complementing it by linking Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, building the transmission network. Building transmission network in Afghanistan, and then having the opportunity of electricity exchange from the Central Asian countries to South Asia. As you may know, Pakistan has a tremendous energy shortfall, and through enhanced collaboration and connectivity between Central and South Asia, Central Asian surplus could be transferred and exported to South Asia, strengthening the interrelationship between those two sub-regions. However, some geopolitical considerations need to be taken into account. The issue of India-Pakistan was already mentioned. Transit trade is being facilitated. But you also have substantial geopolitical considerations in the water energy nexus. In particular, the large hydro potential in Tajikistan and Kyrgyz, and irrigation requirements which you have downstream. So the geopolitics within Central Asia and Central Asia and South Asia is something which will need to be taken into account in the further development of the Silk Road, both from the physical infrastructure but also from the softer side. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Gerhaeusser for this additional picture so that now I think we've had a rather good review of what is underway. And I think this was really the good base. Of course, you could note from the different contributions that the reference to the political dimension, geopolitical, the practice on the ground, the obstacles, the soft part of these projects are very important too. I mean, we are not far from politics. We are in politics through infrastructure. Let's consider these different dimensions, turning to the floor, and we have 20 minutes maximum opportunity for debate. The floor is open. Are these projects so intimidating? Maybe sorry, somebody, yes.
Could you please raise them?
So, for the time, yes, please. Up to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Stephen Mann from ExxonMobil. We have, of course, an interest in Turkmenistan and the potential TAPI pipeline. And my question is for Mr. Gerhaeusser because the ADB has been leading the TAPI effort. I'd like to ask what the ADB sees as the 2013 timeline for TAPI events. I know there's another roadshow in March. And a second question to that, in terms of the financing for TAPI, what the ADB envisions as the debt versus equity ratio in financing the TAPI project.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Gerhaeusser.
Thank you very much for the question. As you know, the TAPI project has made quite some progress over the last 2 to 3 years. The intergovernmental agreements were signed, the pipeline framework agreement was signed, and just recently the gas sales and purchase agreements among some of the players, as well as the roadshow in Singapore, New York, as well as in London. I myself was in London for part of the discussions. The TAPI discussions are structured and spearheaded by a steering committee comprising ministers of the 4 countries, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. And there were deliberations immediately after the roadshow. There are further deliberations on how to move forward. There has been quite interesting feedback from the market on the project. The project as such is seen as bankable, and quite a number of financial institutions took part in the roadshow. And therefore, looking forward to 2013, and as Ambassador Blake already mentioned before, the issue of a consortium, formation of a consortium, will be the next step, and we are in the process of discussing the preliminary steps towards such a formation. You mentioned in particular 2013, the timeline. I don't want to go into any details at that stage, but clearly the steps forward are known and based and informed by the roadshow and by further discussion among the participants. We hope that further progress is being made.
I think, Mr. Gerhaeusser, I may add a word on this, because indeed we have seen progress moving forward, but the big question is about the company, and so the forthcoming question of the consortium. Because in the end, I think we must relate this point to the debate of yesterday we had when clearly Ambassador Richard Morningstar reminded that de facto no international company would enter without having a foot for its own activity in Turkmenistan. And we know very much that TAPI has perspective because the South Yolotan big opportunity is giving great potential for the future. But for the time being, and this is the same problem with Trans-Caspian, the problem is of access of the companies into the Turkmen energy system. And for the time being, except China and in some way Gazprom, I mean, this is unclear. So we can see here quite an important question mark. Mr. Bathija wanted to speak.
No, I just wanted to enlarge the whole issue, which you did very well, I presume. But as far as Afghanistan is concerned, we are attaching significant importance to this TAPI. In matter of fact, we have taken visits even at the heads of state level. We have raised this issues, and we have committed to it, and there's a continuous dialogue actually on a monthly basis. And of course, ADB is right in the heart of it, and they are accompanying us in many, many discussions and so on. So commitment is there. Commitment is also there at CASA because we also see these type of projects as part of our regional cooperation initiatives and what we want to attach to it. Some technical assistance in this area. Similarly, on the roads, Afghanistan has built in the past 10 years more roads than in the history we have done so. So it's a very well connected in terms of roads. Of course, much is happening because of the mountainous environment. The transactions or trucking or transport takes place by the road. And as the Secretary General of BSEC already mentioned, we are already signed or reactivated our IRU arrangements with the countries. Ambassador Blake very rightly pointed out that with all the assistance that we get, and which I would like to put it on the record, we appreciate it very much from the United States and the donor community. The railway programs. I have been actually asked by the cabinet to set up an institutional mechanism to have a railway because we never have the experience of the railway. So we have now set up some sort of institutional cell, independent authority idea, which hopefully will go through it. But this railway is basically for our natural resources. As you know, Ambassador, we have an iron ore contract which we have signed with India. We have a copper contract which we have signed with China, and many other such future natural resource has to be developed, and those you cannot go by trucks or they cannot go by horses, so it has to have a railway as a part of it. So we are working on that aspect very, very extensively. Very rightly so that you mentioned on the software side of it, the border crossing. Yes, that is an obstacle. I need not to say that the press is full of it, what is happening on our eastern border side, how much our transactions, our commercial goods and services are postponed. So that help is certainly needed on that part. But overall, since you also referred to early on this Northern Distribution Network, we have taken this whole initiative very seriously, and of course we are in close touch with, under the United States guidance, we are basically talking to our Central Asian neighbors to make sure that all this, what is required to be done for the movements of goods, services, military hardware, has to be taken place in a more efficient manner that we are doing it so. But all in all, it all links to some sort of update initiative, as Ambassador, you rightly pointed out. Many has been taken place. What is the next one and how to go about it? I fully agree with you that the Silk Road Initiative is one of it, that we can go by it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the floor with questions. Caution again. Bob.
Is this on? Yes. So let me just comment briefly on the Northern Distribution Network, since that's come up repeatedly. As has been said, there was a quite important effort over the last 3 years by the United States and others to stand up the Northern Distribution Network. working very closely with our partners in Afghanistan and, of course, with our partners in Central Asia. I think that there are opportunities now to leverage those networks that have been created, not only rail but also road networks, to indeed supplement the very important efforts that the ADB has underway to develop the 6 transport corridors that Klaus talked about earlier. Because we see that as we look ahead now, you have Central Asia and Afghanistan at the crossroads of many different trade routes, from Turkey, from the EU, from Russia, from China, and of course from India. And if you can open up these trade routes and again, reduce a lot of the border impediments that have been discussed already, but many of the other impediments, there's a huge opportunity to dramatically increase trade. I mentioned just the India part of it, but the India-Pakistan part of it is as much as $10 billion just in a year. But I think that there's much more to be considered. And I think what's encouraging now is that countries like the Chinese are beginning to take quite an important effort in this, helping to develop this infrastructure. And they see that there are important opportunities to move, for example, goods through roads and rails through Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, through Uzbekistan down to Turkey, down to the Indian Ocean, but also across Kazakhstan to Europe. So again, many of these projects are already underway, and I think that's an encouraging sign.
I would like to just expand a bit on what Ambassador Burke said about the Chinese dimension. Well, we could not cover everything, but I think we also have to realize, using the words which have been taken about landlocked countries, in order to stress that Qinghai and Xinjiang provinces in the western part of China are also highly landlocked provinces. And that this far west of China has an absolute need, with the pace of economic development of China we all know, to get the ways out for its own activity. And therefore, when you travel in the region, and we have been doing that in different respects, we can see step by step how bits and pieces of connections, roads, and so on are built in order to allow export from the West, and not only from the ports of the East, which are, of course, the big field of this tremendous expansion. But now, what has been called the development of the West is a program which has been launched 10 years ago, begins to, from inside, where lots of finance has come to these remote provinces, now the need to go further. And therefore, I mean, if you take one of the most mountainous part of Tajikistan through the 4,000-meter high place where you have near Murgab, this is really a high plateau of a Tibetan type. You see trucks, Chinese trucks all the day. And this is a very complicated road to be improved through further investment. So we have to bring in this picture this additional dimension, I think, to understand the challenge of crossing this huge physical barrier, either from the big northern part, and you have to add China on the Chinese dimension, this Turkmenistan-China pipeline, which has been built in 2 years, from 2009 to 2011, with 30 BCM potential, and we are already in the discussion about the 60 BCM, that is a doubling. So I just would like to recall this about the scope of expansion of these opportunities, which until now have been clearly underdeveloped for physical or political reasons. Further contributions or questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Bill Veal, I'm Executive Director of the U.S. Kazakhstan Business Association. I want to bring another topic into this discussion, and that's global warming. About maybe 3-4 months ago, a former American ambassador to Kazakhstan wrote an op-ed piece that appeared in either New York Times or Wall Street Journal about a passing window of opportunity for Central Asia and these land routes, the Silk Road. That with the warming going on in the Arctic, that water routes from Asia to Europe will become attractive at a certain point. If this friction continues to exist at the border crossing points, strategic shippers, shall we say, will look at these new emerging opportunities as a bypass around this patchwork of political units that are imposing this friction. So it seems to me that there's a kind of, well, you can take it or leave it really in terms of whether that's a near-term threat. But the issue, it seems to me, is really with the governments and the countries where the border crossing issues are, and that there needs to be a serious effort by donor countries and assistance countries to focus the elites of these countries on the opportunities of the growing trade, which several of you have mentioned in that area, as participants in helping the pie grow. Right now, you have an informal revenue collection system going on at the border that is flowing into various hands in the governments and elsewhere in these countries. And that's what you've got to really focus on is diverting that and making the case that there is more money to be made legitimately in the trade. Part of that picture, it seems to me, is also cultivating the development of local entrepreneurs on either sides of the borders so that you have a kind of demand pull for this amongst the players in the countries for that. And that's, again, something that seems to me that donors need to be contributing. I'd appreciate any comments from any members of the panel on that line of thinking. Thank you.
I thank you, and I think we come back again to this problem we mentioned several times. As you said very starkly, in fact, the problem is that border crossing is a trade by itself, a good to be shared through different connections and linkages. And so when you have such an expansion of the cost of the border crossing specific trade, well, what is the price? The price is loss in trade itself. So for myself, I must say, I've been really advocating after different technical conferences on NDN that's a real and regional based, because yes, donors can do a lot, but in the end, it's a local governance problem. And therefore, you can push, you can recommend, but if the customs management integration is not working enough, then the culture is missing to exploit these tremendous opportunities we are discussing. EU has had a very well-known program in the region, which is BOMCA, Border Management in Central Asia, connected with BOMAF, Border Management in Afghanistan, but we are still working on the elementary data, that is to pass the concept of integrated border management. We repeat that all the time, everywhere, in repeated programs and conferences and so on, but we are still working on the basics there. This is one of the core problems, maybe the softer in technical terms, but directly linked to governance. Ambassador Chrysanthopoulos.
Well, let's go to what you started at the outset with the shipping lanes that will be opened because of global warming. Okay, so the ships may go, but where do they land to leave their freight? I mean, if there are no port facilities there, it's just a long trip to one of the already, how do you call it, overburdened ports of Northern Europe, where the waiting time is simply tragic sometimes there. That's why, that's the benefits of the road transport, if we are able to eliminate these delays at the borders. Now, within BSEC, I mean, and IRU has done a lot, and Turkey has done a lot there. We have customs that you only cross customs once. I mean, you have, for example, I think it's on the Bulgarian border or on the Georgian border, where there is only one control, where you have the customs officers on the Turkish side working along them, so the trucks pass and the passengers pass only once from one control post. And that helps a lot because it eliminates the delays of having a double custom control, double payments, and makes life simpler, much more simple for everybody. And the electronic pre-declarations are also very, very useful and very practical. We are doing it within all BSEC countries. It's being implemented. And I think that slowly this will be extended to the Asian countries. And in this way, we will try to eliminate. But as you say, it's a question of the governments that have to take the decision to simplify the process. And as I said at the outset, the UN conventions, if they are implemented correctly, it solves the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Blake wanted to have a word.
Let me just address what Bill was talking about in terms of the importance of competition. And I think that's sort of at the heart of this. I think companies and countries are constantly looking for ways to cut costs, but also cut shipping times. One of the interesting phenomenon that I've noticed in my own work has been that countries like Latvia and Lithuania are increasingly active in Afghanistan and Central Asia because they see a strategic opportunity to take a bit of the China trade. Instead of having a shipment that has to go through the Straits of Malacca, across the Indian Ocean, and then up through the Suez Canal, they see a tremendous opportunity to leverage the road and rail transport networks that are being developed through Kazakhstan and the rest of Central Asia to significantly cut the shipping times to Europe. And so they are already hard at work on this and are very, very active in this whole field. And that's very welcome. And so we encourage that. And so it just comes back to the point Bill made, which is that there is already competition underway, and the Central Asians must recognize that and take immediate steps to address many of these issues that we've just talked about.
Thank you, Bob. I don't see specific requests and time is running, so I think we must come to a close. And the conclusion of Ambassador Blake is maybe a very good one. We are in an historical stage. If you come back to old times, you have had the Silk Road was a land route and was more or less killed by the maritime Silk Road around the 14th, 15th century. And when you look at the economics of transportation today, you can have some kind of reversal, which is exactly what was described through the initiatives and moves of Latvia and Lithuania, taking advantage of circumstances. It was a bit forgotten, but in the end, gave a boost. And so now this is to be expanded. I must say, following your point, Kazakhstan has been very much pushing in that direction. But once again, I mean, what struck me is that Kazakhstan is arguing very well, but is confronted with lack of perception outside and practical problems of management inside. This border business problem, which is killing business in a way. So I would finish with a recommendation to our very good organizers for next session, next forum. I think we'll have to come back because there's a potential here. And my only personal request will be we should have a map, because this is key to understand how much the challenge is there, the opportunity is there, and it's just not to have the physical location of the countries, well, more or less we have some idea, but just to see the routes and the routes are not enough perceived to drive enough understanding. We all have wonderful, including lights there for the potash pipelines. We need to have some kind of even modest equivalent for the transportation route. And then I think a much wider circle of participants and decision-making authorities will understand that there is a good and promising challenge. Thank you very much, and please join in thanking the speakers as well as thanking yourselves, I would say, for this good informative session.